Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Color Marketing Group's Colorspeak. I'm Alicia Kashishian, and I'm on the executive board of the Color Marketing Group. I'm working with the educational team. And we're really glad you've joined us today. As a color educator, I'm particularly excited about this. I'm going to introduce you to the Color Literacy Project. It's an educational initiative that the Inter-Society Color Council of the US and the International Color Association, which is the ISCC and the AIC, they're working on together. And our speakers are going to give us a background and share with us the progress they're making on this incredibly ambitious venture. It's pretty exciting. So our first speaker is Maggie Maggio. She's retired from architectural design in 2015, is now spending her time advocating for the integration of art and science in color education programs worldwide. It's pretty exciting. She's president-elect of the ISCC and the co-chair of AIC's study group on color education. Her hope is to develop state-of-the-art resources for teaching in the 21st century, color in the 21st century. But following Maggie will be Luann Stovall. She's an artist, color theorist, and a lecturer at the University of Texas. Her paintings and works on paper have been exhibited widely in museums and galleries across the US. She's taught many workshops and courses from art schools to schools of business. She's a board director of the ISCC and a member of the steering team of the Global Color Literacy Project. It's really exciting stuff, so I'm glad you guys are all here to watch it. We would like, after the presentation, we hopefully will have time. If you have any questions or observations about this, please put it in the Q&A section. And then after the presentations, we'll have a conversation. We love to have dialogue. So please participate if you have anything you want to share with us. So at that, I'm going to share, Maggie, get the screen. So have at it.
Today, Luann Stovall and I are going to present an update on our color literacy project. This presentation we have titled Bottom Up, Top Down, because we are actually approaching color literacy from the very earliest ages all the way through to university. And I'm going to be sharing a little bit about what we're doing at the bottom-up approach. So why are we doing anything about color literacy at this point? Mostly because we're surrounded by color. It's all around us. And yet a lot of our understanding of color is based in what we learned in kindergarten or even before. We need to change that now because everyone, including all the kids, are going to be on the computers. They're going to be needing to work with all kinds of equipment. And we want to put science literacy together with visual literacy. And we call that color literacy. So that is our term, color literacy, for the project. And what is literacy all about? There are some key concepts that even babies have to learn, and you'll see lots and lots of this kind of poster out there. This is maybe a little too young of a baby to even understand it, but we're talking about some key concepts that are expected for kids to learn before they even start preschool. And that is, they need to learn, of course, the alphabet, their letters, they need to learn their numbers, and they need to learn colors and shapes. Those are the four key concepts. You'll see lots and lots of board books for kids at this age. They want, colors and numbers and shapes and just so many of these that are available right now. And I want to go through those four topics one by one and talk about what they are in terms of the topics that are covered in color education. So the first is something that has to do with the basic color terms, or in our lingo, the BCTs. And that's all about language arts. And then you also have board books that are about rainbows. And really, if you think about it, that's about the science of color. And you'll also have books about mixing. A lot of mixing books that talk about red, yellow, blue primaries, about 1% will talk about anything other than red, yellow, blue primaries. And those are used in the arts curriculum. And then a fourth category, which we don't want to overlook, is that about emotions and the feelings and the associations around color. This is a hot topic right now in social and emotional learning in the classroom. And so we'll slot that into social studies. So one thing about each of these categories and topics is that they're all about hue. They're all about the rainbow colors. They're all about the vivid colors. We want to point out that all of these are based on limiting the color concepts. So what we're looking to is to do 21st century color that expands beyond the rainbow, beyond these vivid hues. This is critical part of what we're doing in the Color Literacy Project. Is we're not trying to say there's something wrong. We're trying to say there's every reason to grow, to expand what we're learning. So taking them one at a time, we have our basic color terms. And so we have the white, black, red, green, yellow, blue, brown. And these 11 terms in pretty much every book I have about learning color naming, these are the 11 terms that are in the books. Sometimes they'll add silver and gold. But what we really want to talk about are basic color terms plus hue variations and come up with a language for talking about vivid versions of colors, pale, muted, and dark. We can expand beyond hue and move into some of these other terms that you might call the character of the color or maybe the nuance of the color. It is something very much part of the foundation of what we're working on, is to expand vocabulary. We want to talk about expanding beyond the rainbow a little bit and beyond the connection to Roy G. Biv. And that, of course, comes out of the spectrum and about learning about the science of color. One thing we want to try to reinforce is that the rainbow does not have all the colors that we can see, that there are extra spectral hues in the purples and magentas. So we need to add those words to our vocabulary. In the mixing section, there's a lot that has to do with red, yellow, blue. In fact, it's ubiquitous. We want to maybe expand beyond that and say not necessarily focusing on new primaries, but focusing again on the variations of colors. So if you have a language that you're talking about, the light and the vivid and maybe the pale colors, the muted colors, when you get into mixing, which would be the next step, you can talk about how you make those colors with mixing. And in some ways, kind of get beyond, again, this idea of it's all about primary colors, because our world is much bigger than that. We also have this idea of the feelings. And in the last few years, there's been quite a bit about connecting color to feelings. They, of course, focus only on the vivid hues. And the reality is, and Luann will speak to this a little bit more at the university level, the reality is that the mood and the feeling and the emotional communication about color is, if you're limiting it to vivid hues, you are missing a huge area of color that is actually probably more potent in what it communicates. You know, the muted colors do not communicate the same as the vivids, and the darks and the pales, of course, have a very different language that they're speaking. So each of these is, I'm using the plus signs intentionally and saying that if we were to call these concepts our old baseline, what we're trying to do is to get to a new baseline, something that by the time they get out of elementary school, they've been introduced to some of these concepts already. So scaffolding is a big term in education. It just means that you have to start with the basic information and then build on it. You know, for math, you don't start with calculus, you start with 1 and 1 is 2. Same thing is true for color education. So we're trying to get beyond the rainbow, and we want to connect light and color. We want to mix hue variations, and we want to talk about all the variations of color and how those make you feel. So that is our stair-stepping approach to what we want to have happen at the elementary school and even preschool level. We actually have been working with a school in Manchester, in England, that is starts at age 3 and goes all the way up to age 11. What we're really going to do is put together some modules that are plug-in modules. And at the nursery school level, we're talking about expanding the hue names. So we, for instance, could introduce magenta, turquoise, cyan, lime, there's many new terms that are not in any of the books that we want to include. At the next age level, we'll go into more variations of those hues, and we'll introduce some idea about light shadow. Look around you, see how light affects color. The next age level, we'll talk more about three-dimensionality of color, so the attributes of color, how the eye works, how we see in the science area. In the arts area, we'll probably look at the building of three-dimensional models. And in the older ages, they'll start to understand a little bit more about how color, there's modes of appearance. Something glossy is different from something matte, for example. We'll introduce a little bit more of the science of color using the color perception triangle that connects the light, the object, the eye, and the brain. And then we'll do some comparative mixing at this point. This is the first time we would recommend introducing primaries in any probably formulaic way, but do it so that you're comparing the different kinds of primaries, printing process, something that has to do with the computer and the additive primaries. And then at this point too, you can really talk about color and culture. This may be where discussions of race and color come in. The social studies part is blooming, as I said, in terms of how we look at color in connection to emotion. So that would be what we want to do for that. What we're also working with is we realize we need some strategies that connect to the current pedagogical hot topics. And the hot topics right now have shifted from what used to be the STEAM, the science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. That is still hot, but it is taking second place currently to social emotional learning in the classroom. And that's probably due to what has happened over the last few years with COVID and the fact that they've had to do a lot of digital learning and they've not been with each other. So in terms of the standards, we are trying to hook into the next generation science standards. I think they were adopted in 2014, and the National Core Art Standards in 2015, something like that. And these are really new approaches to how you teach and how you engage students in the classroom. The other area that we've looked at is, and it's related to STEAM, that is the 5 E's. This is a big part of what we're doing. We're not only talking about what to teach, but how to teach at those early ages. And so we are using the 5 E's, which begins with engage, and then explore, and then explain. And that's not the teacher explaining, that's the students vocalizing what they've seen and what they've explored. And then you do an elaboration of that concept, and then you finally do an evaluation and start all over again. So we are looking to really create some modules that work with this kind of the standards and this kind of an approach. I do want to, now I'm going to point out just a little bit about what we've done with the International Color Day this past March. Our school, I'm going to show these very quick. This is just for fun. Our partner school, St. Teresa's in Manchester, their teachers went through 12 hours of training, all the teachers at the school. It was supported by the headmistress, supported by a coordinator, someone who is part of their, the equivalent of maybe the board of the school. So this is.
So we got here, muted, pale, vivid.
I don't know if you were able to hear that, but they talked about hue, they talked about dark, they talked about muted, and they talked about light or pale, and then they talked about vivid. So this is in one of the classrooms, that first part of what we're trying to do. They also expanded the rainbow by putting a little silver strip between the colors that are on the rainbow and the extra spectral colors. They went looking to match colors to these new versions, and they were doing a little bit of mixing, expanding the hue families into their pale and dark and muted versions. This is actually the oldest grades did this kind of a mural that they're going to be putting up in the school. They talked about it on Twitter. They were inspired to do some when we talk about aerial perspective, we talk about the colors fading. So they explored that. This is what that looks like. And then one of the year groups did mobiles. This is a school-wide celebration of International Color Day. They spent a week preparing for it. They spent all day playing with color in each of the classrooms. And we're very thrilled with what they did. So just as a recap, this is what it's looking like for the new baseline. And at this point, we are hoping that this new baseline continues through middle school and high school at kind of a little more in-depth level. And by the time they get to university, they'll have this new baseline. And with this, I want to mention our color literacy website, which we are building at this point, and it is at colorliteracy.org. It is as Alicia mentioned, it is a joint project between the International Color Association, the AIC, the Intersociety Color Council, and as part of AIC, we are doing this through the study group on color education. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Luann to talk about, since we've just built this foundation at the early education, what that might look like at university level.
Thank you, Maggie. I appreciate that. Are you all seeing my screen?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
seeing it.
Yes, yeah, we are. That's good.
Okay, terrific. Well, thank you, Maggie. Thank you to everyone for joining us today and being part of this exciting evolution in color. So we have been talking about color education scaffolding at for K through 12 students. So let's take a look at the role at the university level. Informed, intentional color design is important in so many diverse disciplines with so many diverse applications. And if we look at the role of science first, we can see that science drives the research and development of state-of-the-art technologies and tools, starting with light and lighting, innovations in lighting technologies. And then there's, of course, material science. That's all the technologies working with the dyes and the coatings and the pigments, everything basically for the manufacturing process that we use for all of our things. And then we get to the observer. There's the physiology of vision, and of course, neuroscience. The question then is turned over to say, what about the arts? What role does the art and design play? So I think one way to answer that would be to look around you right now, and everything that's around us, if it's not designed by nature, it's designed by humans. So that's, of course, involving color. And I want to think about the arts, not art as a singular, but arts plural, which are responsible for the application of the tools and technologies. So all of the design fields serve as a bridge between science and you and me, the general public. And you'll see some examples up here on the screen. I just wanted to name a few because when we're thinking about color education, this is what we're talking about. Graphic design, marketing, branding, communication design, photography, film and video, arts and entertainment technologies, user experience design, information design, fashion design, product design, interior design, architecture, landscape design, and urban planning, among others. But unfortunately, there is no updated color education curriculum that has been designed yet to prepare students for real-world applications. So we're connecting the dots now. We have exactly the same challenges at the university level that Maggie talked about for younger students. The question is why? And I think we're all asking this question. Why is that? And one answer is because color education has not been a priority in the culture. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Most students have not received much, if any, color education before they get to campus. And so I want to ask you a question, and if you would and this would go in the chat box, because we want to know what you know. Would you please tell us where you learned the most about color for your work that you're doing now? And because that's really what we're addressing. Where did you learn it, or where did you learn? Was it on campus or was it someplace else? So please type your answers in the chat box. And I'd like to have a chance after I finish this part to be able to address that as part of color education. So if you want to study color on campus now, where would you go? You might guess the art department, because traditionally color has been associated with studio art and painters. And I know that because I am a painter from the studio art department. But you'd be disappointed because color education has mostly been neglected. And I like to, the way I think about it is it got stuck in a kind of a time warp, and it hasn't really evolved much for decades. The reality is that there's very few dedicated color courses out there. Yes, there are a few exceptions, and this is a shout out to those progressive departments and faculty and administrators that actually make that happen. And we have our eye on them and are connecting with them for this project. But mostly, color has been taught as one of many elements of design in the first year foundations program, where there's only just a basic, a couple of paint mixing projects. Part of the problem is a deeply rooted bias against color that has been simmering in the culture for decades, mostly under radar. Through this lens, color is thought to be decorative and non-essential. Certainly not a subject for serious study unless it's inside the art department. But we feel like now, for 21st century color is a completely different bottom-up, top-down paradigm that is actually now the next state of color education for the next generation of students. So I think a good way to lead into where we want to go with this, and we're bringing, asking you to come on board with us here, is to look at this John Medina quote, and you can see what he's saying. If you haven't read his book, Brain Rules, he's a molecular biologist / neuroscientist, and rule number 10 is right up here, and this is what you're reading. So if we understand how primary vision is to the way we live in the world, then it makes a whole lot of sense that we would want to study color perception. But I think, we're redefining what that means, what color is, but now we have an opportunity. So I think I like this slide because one of the things that's so important is to connect color with light. And you're seeing on the left the electromagnetic spectrum, which is all of the energy in the cosmos, basically moving at the speed of light. We see the very narrow band that we humans see as color vision. And if we're seeing white, quote unquote, white light, we're looking at all those wavelengths that are in play. And I think if we're looking at spectral reflectance curves, that's going to show you that actually light has all different kinds of colors. It's not sufficient to say white light. You can see that if we understand the wavelengths of the rainbow that Maggie showed earlier, we'll have different spiking of different wavelengths of different lighting. And that's going to have an impact on how we see, what we see, and how we feel. So I'm going to move to the next slide. So if we think about light, now we're going to move our attention into what we see in the world. And I feel like we have a lot to learn from Mother Nature. And you can see here that obviously color is not non-essential. Color is actually fundamental to the health and well-being of the animals. For surviving and for thriving. It's also incredibly important for our pleasure, for our aesthetic pleasure. It's not just true for our fellow animals, but also for us. So if we move from the environment around us and how much color tells us about the environment, and all these codes that we are actually living by, we don't realize how much we navigate through the world guided by color-coded information. And it's designed really for safer and more efficient human interactions because there are so many of us on the planet. We know a lot more. I like to say this when I'm doing one of my workshops or classes. We know a lot more about color than we really think we do. When we're looking at all these images here, we basically have, we've learned to know what those mean. We've been trained, and we fail to appreciate often how important that is. And there's another aspect besides, the signage that's everywhere, but also the color codes that relate to symbols. And I think, I have a feeling that most everyone in the audience, has a sense of where the pink and blue code came from in the early 20th century. But part of what I'm concerned about is, are these codes necessarily the ones we want to say? Do they work for us now? The color codes can work for us positively or negatively, but we have an opportunity once we're aware of them to be able to say, you know, this may not be what we want to do, or maybe there's another way to do this, because the codes are, they can cause a lot of issues. So you'd seen this slide earlier that Maggie brought up. This is, I'm going to be quoting from the work, not quoting, but referring to the work of Ellen Divers. And this is what she's labeled. And I think this is an important way to think about, if you're focusing primarily on the hues, is it red, purple, yellow, green, and blue? That's the hue paradigm. We're failing to recognize something that's even deeper. And just before I flip to the next slide, you can see, just for instance, on the blue, these are the characters obviously from Inside Out. This is inside Riley's brain, and these are the different aspects of emotion. But even on the blue, you can see it moves from light to dark, green. The yellow is very bright, but it's moving down to the dark. And all of these are not just, it's not just about the hue. And I think that oversimplification can be very harmful, but we have a chance, harmful in the sense that we're not recognizing what's really happening on a deeper level. So this is Ellen Divers' work related to the value chroma paradigm. And I've done some of this for my students when we're looking at when you're looking at an environment, you know, what is the most important factor that's helping you to really feel what's going on in that space. So if you think about the value, the darkness or lightness, and how the brightness, those two issues are very important in how we're tied so deeply to levels of light on a very, very deep level. And it's important to understand that when we're thinking about light and the qualities of light. So moving into that kind of paradigm, especially at the university level, is going to be very important for a lot of different disciplines. And it leads us to this image, which is made by a friend of mine who's a neuroscientist, Zach Pickow. And I call this, he made this, but I labeled it the mothership. This is our brain. And I like to think at this point, our brain is a multimodal machine. So it's not just for vision, it's all of our senses, right? All of our information coming in from everywhere and weaving into a sort of seamless, ever-changing perception of the world. This is where color perception is part of this. So the question is, how do we apply what we know about color to the human experience? So first we need to gather all the research and information, which that's why we want to connect all the dots together and really work together, connecting all the research and information. And that is really what the Color Literacy Project is so arduously dedicated to doing. And we're asking you to join us. Once that's in place, the connection of all the research, the next step is design a curriculum based on the identified foundational components in 21st century color. So that gets us to, I love this image. I've used this a lot. It's one of my favorites. It's the Great Wave of off Kanagawa by Hokusai in 1831. It's a Japanese woodblock print. But I feel like this shows what we're talking about here is a sea change, not just tweaking curriculum, you know, but rethinking, realizing, you know, we have an opportunity now with neuroscience and physics and everything that we're doing to connect it with the arts, to connect it with experience, you know, and have a sea change. I think it's a marvelous opportunity to upgrade, you know, to level up and to evolve. So like a sea change, though, you can see it feels unpredictable and unsettling because we are now re-evaluating some very entrenched notions about what color is. And the goal is to provide state-of-the-art education for the next generation of students. So all of this is really, what can we give to our students? What is education really about? Because they have big problems to solve and opportunities to create, you know, marvelous new experiences for humans. So these are, you see the categories on the right, those would be sort of the basic color literacy categories that we feel like are all part of the 21st century color. So here's the chart that Maggie ended up showing you from the elementary, middle, and high school. We've said we need to address all of that. These are the skills that the students do not have that training yet, even when they get to college, right? So how do we do that, you know? And you see the topics here: color, space, design, psychology, communication, lighting, and color interaction. Those are these units that we would feel like needs to be addressed for state-of-the-art color competencies, and that's from the top down and bottom up. So we're really referring to color here. This sort of, how do we think about color now, you know, in this sort of new framework? And I like to call that meta color. So it's a bigger thing. It's evolved to something bigger. And the question here is, where does this fit? So we're going to go on into thinking about how do we do this? So this is where we are right now. If the students don't have the training, where do they get that? So those of you that are coming from design fields, there's been an evolution in design, the way design is taught in the last decade. And that's really talking about design thinking. And you can see the process there that it's a circular process, but starting with ideating and then making prototypes, testing, empathizing, getting the feedback, defining, and then starting back again, ideating. And we feel like this is exactly, color is part of the design process, but right now it's not. So here's what we're looking at. So we can integrate it into the process from the very beginning, not added on as an afterthought, but as an opportunity for deeper engagement in service of a more responsible, informed, and inspired outcome. So how do you integrate color into the design thinking? I think that's really what our opportunity is. Because color has been packaged as one of many elements of design, but color is one of those that, as we realize what it is, it has evolved. And so now we're saying to have it just be one of the many components of a design, early design class is not enough. So we're talking about plug-in design modules, and they would be able to address those categories that we talked about. And obviously the modules can be, as plugins, can be then adapted with more information depending on which design discipline we're talking about. But all along, as they're developing design, we will be able to integrate color. So here's where we are right now with the next generation of change and for the 21st century color. We're looking to, our goal is by 2025 to be able to have the foundational modules in play. So a lot of work's going to be happening between now and then, but to address these issues that we're talking about. So with a lot of collaboration. And then by 2035, the idea is to have all of the modules in place. So it'll be we'll no longer be able to have to start at the university and work back, but the students coming into university will have had that training. So that is wonderful because they won't have to unlearn the misconceptions. And that means that they'll have an opportunity to do all kinds of interesting things because they've had that training with color and with color perception. So I can only imagine what they'll be able to create at that point. The sky is definitely the limit there. So where do we get there though? Well, we're happy to announce that we have coming up on the 22nd of April, the very first Color Literacy Forum. This is part of the Color Literacy Project, and I'll show you our partners coming up momentarily. But it is a virtual gathering, featuring presentations and discussions related to updating and expanding color education at the university level. So our very first talk, you may have heard, if you haven't heard Ingrid Calvo-Ivanovic, she is incredibly interesting with what her research has been over the last 10 years in analyzing the state of color teaching in design programs across the globe in the last decade. So she's going to be presenting her research and ideas for moving forward. She is one of the members of the Color Literacy Project. So that information is on colorliteracy.org on our website. And you can see that, and we'll mention a couple of things. Maggie already talked about the AIC and the Color Group for Study Education, where we're housing the Color Literacy Forum, and you can join this study group. You can see the ISCC here, and then Cumulus. So Cumulus, I want to mention who they are because we're really, really happy to be partnering with them. They are the leading global association of art and design education and research in the world, with 350 member institutions from 63 countries. And they are interested in partnering with us to get the word out. They're already connected to the universities. So to be able to have a forum to start the conversation here, asking for feedback, and engaging our partners across the world, this is what we're talking about. So basically we can think about the Color Literacy Forum as a call to action. And this is a bad pun, but forgive me for this. We hope everyone can catch the color wave because it takes a generation to build a new foundation. We will need all hands on deck. And there's opportunities for everyone, I think, to provide feedback and to get involved. So the last point I was going to make is we'll be giving another update at the June AIC conference in Toronto in the study group for color education. So stay tuned for that and stay with us. We're looking forward to seeing what we can make together. So thank you so much. And I will stop sharing my screen.
That was fantastic, you guys. It's very, 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 very exciting. And I'm impatient. I wanted to start being in there. So I have a bunch of comments. First of all, the comments about the education was really fascinating. And I'd say that the #1 response was on the job. People learned on the job, which, that's the case for me also. Self-taught was up there a lot, some college, some formal educations. Somebody shout out to you, Luann, they learned their color from you. One of my favorites was somebody learned color from fashion magazines of the 50s and the 60s. So that's pretty humorous by itself. I have a couple of other questions to add into this or to further this. I'm curious because, of course, this is very exciting and we love this, and the direction is, what I like about it is, as I've said, we talked about it's expansive. It's not limiting the ideas. It's just broadening our approach and our acceptance of color terminology. But with the arts on the decline in education, how do you see that as an obstacle, and how do you hope to overcome that? And I'm curious about public versus private education. And so maybe you could talk to that a little bit.
I can talk to that a little bit. There is a reason why we are using the STEAM topic as part of what we want to address, and it's still a very important part of curriculum. It's still a trend at the early education levels to focus on science, technology, engineering, and math. And we were in consulting with a few people early on. The suggestion was to go in through the science door. Mm. So if we are going to recognize that the arts at that level are very much marginalized at this point because they don't have time, really. We have to have some way to encourage them to look at color from a different perspective, and maybe that's going to be how we do it. So yeah, I think that is the approach. Color is not an arts topic. It's not.
Are you okay with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Luann?
Yeah, that's the question. That's a great question. I have had so much pushback on this subject. I cannot even begin to speak. And our colleagues all say the same thing. I would say at university level, I would agree with Maggie. I would say though that that's why when I made the point about art being plural, and when I talked about that deep division in the culture, I feel what I've been seeing is, yes, that's true about art being neglected, but that's not so much true of design at university level. So design is hot, but because it's sort of a bit new, it's sort of come out, as a new approach with design thinking and user experience, that kind of thing. It hasn't picked up color. They haven't realized color was seen, same bias in the culture, as part of, studio art, which is not anybody else's concern mostly. That's what has been thought. But I'm trying to make the case. I think the case is, if we go in through design thinking, which is hot, and we wrap it into that, that's our entry point, and we do it as an integrated component that is very much, and I'm definitely cool with it not being just art. Art's just is one little piece of it. And I think that's that's the question. It is color perception. It's how we live in the world. And it should not be part of art. Does art have color? Sure. Yeah. So does fashion design. So does, so it's not, that is, I think, one way to talk about that. We're expanding way beyond that and realizing we have a completely different thing on our hands now.
Yeah. So you're sorry.
I think that is one of the key messages, is that color education is not about art. It includes art.
Good.
But it is much bigger than that.
So you're having to consciously approach a lot of different disciplines, but that's the wrong word, to make sure that they integrate it into their program, so there's a broader landscape. Does that sound right?
Yep. Integration is the
The key.
That's right. And then the piece that speaks to, Alicia, that is in the forum, we are very aware that it can't just be the individual, you know, I know there's some people on this call, and there's also on different things we've done that are also teach color. And there's some people to do a great job. But for the most part, you know, we have to include, if it's one teacher, it's not enough. That's been my issue here. It's the bias against color has been, it is deeply rooted in the whole culture of education. So we're saying, I think we're saying this is an opportunity to really upgrade, you know, and we have to involve the administrators, the department heads, you know, the philosophy of the design department, and for have them to realize, oh, wait, we didn't realize we could provide this for our students, but now that we're connecting these dots, this is an amazingly important tool for them. And we in order to prepare our students for the world that we have out there, we really need to be able to include this. Like 50% of our brain is focused on color, you know, on vision. So we want to be able to include that. So I think if they hear that part, you know, then we can include in the modules, the plug-in modules, they can actually plug that in at the beginning.
And that's your intention, to be able to provide schools immediate, like, these are the tools you need to integrate this into your program.
Exactly.
Right.
And Luann mentioned a really critical part of what we've discovered over the last couple of years, and that is that you do need, it cannot be one person at a time attempting this. It has to be a shared mission of many people to make it work. And even at the school level, we were really lucky with our partner school in Manchester, because the headmistress and the governor of the school realized that they could put this into every classroom and agreed to have teachers take staff training, all teachers, not the art teacher, all teachers.
That's great.
Well,
so there is a comment here that just came up, and it says, from Sandra, are the educators open to this? I taught high school art in the past and wanted to integrate science, music, theater, etc. The administrators, all caps, were not on board.
Right.
So
yeah, that's exactly right. We know we have to start with the administrators.
So and Montaha says, how is the education being rolled out in the schools? Are they initiatives required to be backed and supported by the governments? Montaha lives in Canada, so I'm sure the system's a little different. So that's a good observation. But she says, also, what are the barriers to implementation?
Mm-hmm.
Where do we start?
Yeah. One of the reasons that we talk about expanding and you know, everything should be plus is because we recognize that the standards actually are very, very limited in what they address. In the next generation of this, once we have a lot of experience, we can maybe go in and go after the standards and change some of the standards. But to try to change the standards first won't work. We are right in this prototyping phase right now. We're trying out stuff. We're getting feedback, and we need feedback from all of you too. Until we know for sure what's going to work well, we can't address the standards. So that was the first part of the question. Luann, you want to?
Well, yeah, I was watching a little bit of the chat come up. It does have to be easy. I mean, the thing that we realize is it's not about retraining all the teachers to learn about color. And I mean, we're not, that's not to say that shouldn't happen, but that's just the plug-in modules is what we're talking about. So, you know, there's been one of the things about COVID, so I'm glad someone mentioned that it does need to be accessible. And if everybody's already so stressed right now that it's like, oh my God, I've got to learn all about color. Color is so complex. It's ridiculously complex. It's fascinating. But the plug-in with COVID, we all had to shift to online learning. And so providing modules where, you know, I mean, where you can say, here's a module on the physics of light. Here's modules on, you know, on the reflectance curve. So if you want to think more about how lighting works, or on different color codes and how they work in different cultures, you know, so they could be, you know, you could see it almost like, and we're just, you know, you guys are hearing this at the very beginning because we're really talking about putting together this, you know, the curriculum. in a way that could be, you could say, if I was teaching design and I said, I wasn't trained in color, because actually I wasn't, I had to learn on the job too, or I got to, but we're saying, you could say to your students, here's a unit, go ahead and take that unit. We'll be wrapping that into your project's going to include, make sure you're including what color strategies are you using, how are you thinking about this? So that could be plug-in units that way, that they could get competency training from, and that without having the teacher take that time and have a class. Now, if they want to do a class on campus, that was dedicated to it, I'm talking at UT, we're talking about the possibility of like a shorter maybe 5-week module, and then maybe another module later on. So it's that kind of more flexible. It would be synchronous and asynchronous. You could do it in person, or you wouldn't have to. That we would make it be able to, because the main thing is we want the students to have access to the information. That's the goal.
Well, it's so complex. One of the things that you mentioned, I think one of the reasons we love color is that the dimensions are vast. I mean, it integrates into every aspect. But I'm also curious, just for the group to know, how many people are in your group, and how often are you meeting, and how are you exchanging ideas? Because I know it's an international group, which is also very important. So,
Maggie, you want to address that?
Well, yeah. So, you're talking about the team and what
yeah.
it looks like. Yeah.
I'm just for everybody to understand, it's not just the two of you involved in this project.
Oh, right. No.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, the color literacy team right now, there's 10 of us. We've been meeting for about 2 years. It includes color science experts, I would say. And Robin in Canada is a PhD astronomer who teaches color for a full year. All of us are experienced color educators, and all of us have recognized the need for some rethinking about the foundations of color education. And so there's, Europe, Australia, and then we have a number of consultants. It's all up on the website who the team consists of. This is in some way our public launch outside of the color community. I would say the AIC and the color marketing group, maybe we're all color colleagues, but it looks like we're about to make this project a little more, we've been kind of behind the scenes working on this, mostly because it's a bit controversial by saying that traditional color theory needs to maybe take a back seat to some of these other approaches.
Well, again, we always have to be flexible in learning because we have to move forward. We just can't stay in these ruts. And with all the new technologies and stuff, as you said, that opens it. We're getting close to the end, but there are a lot of chats. Maggie, have you been able to read some of these?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. We do have. There's a lot of good suggestions here for sure. I mean, we're very familiar with Waldorf and how they approach the teaching of color, as well as Montessori. I mean, my focus is on early education. Luann's is on the university education as two parts of what we're approaching on the project team. The idea of teaching the teachers is core of what we're doing, but not all teachers at every school are going to be able to take the training. So the plug-in modules are a good way to do some self-education around this new approach. So yes, one of the questions I see is, do we include teachers who don't teach color? Yes. One of the things we realize is if you just say take the art teacher at a middle school and have them go through this program, that won't help with the integration, because the other teachers won't be aware of the connections. So ideally, in an ideal world, we would have all the teachers educated together, and that is the key message. The key message is there's enough out there to learn about color that could help everyone. That if for no other reason than to be able to communicate about color better, that we should make this something a bit more universal as part of the educational programs at all ages. So in looking to see where people got their color education, the fact that a lot did not actually go to university for this points to the fact that we really want to build in some of these learning outcomes at an earlier age. Mm-hmm. They should have it by the time they get out of high school, a slightly better understanding of color. So
Well, and some people have asked how to get involved, which we always want to know. So can you just say again what your your connection is, or your website, just
yeah,
or somebody can put it in there.
Color with a U. Yes, we're bringing the U into color. So colorliteracy.org is our website. The forum registration is the link is ready for that on that website. It's also, you can also go to the ISCC website for that link. Someone asked about colorblind student. I want to be sure.
Yeah, good.
Those that have color deficiencies, it's important to recognize that early, and so this actually can help with that as well if you start looking at color from an early age. Yeah, so I hope we get to get a copy of the chat.
Yeah, we'll work on that. I'll leave that up to Sharon. And we're sorry that we lost Luann. She had a technical difficulty and can't get back on, but we're pretty much almost done. So it's been recorded, and I think Sharon knows this stuff better, but probably people that have been on here can access it at some point. And this was really fantastic. Just the fact that people have so many questions and got engaged tells us that you're onto something so important, and it's really good for this outreach. Especially, I think our team is unique from what your groups are, mostly designers in our group. So it's really good to expose us to another perspective, and really grateful for your time. And we all wish you luck. Let us know how we can help you.
That's great. Yes, I want to point out that we are really in that prototyping and feedback stage is important. So if someone wants to try something, this is the long-term process. So we aren't saying we know exactly what you need to do now. We love the fact that you might help us get there.
But when you say you want to try something, you have something that we could integrate into our programs, or just what we have and share the information with you? Either both?
Well, I'm thinking as we put together some modules, we'll be putting them up on our website.
Okay.
So probably in the next 6 months or so, probably by the end of the year, we'll have things for people to try out. And actually, some of the best ways to try it out are actually with the kids at home. So
that's good to know.
Yeah, kids at home or grandkids or somebody you might want to try out some of this with. That's always really, really good feedback. So
excellent. That's about as good as it gets. Start right there in the home, build up from there. All right, you guys, I think that's it. Thank you everybody for being here. The Colorspeak, we try to bring informative and educational information to all of our teams. So be well and see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much to CMG.
Yeah.
And I'll speak for Luann as well. Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye.